Welcome to tonight's exclusive Telegraph subscriber event. My name is Joe Shute and I'm a senior feature writer on the Telegraph. And I'm delighted to say we're joined tonight by Ray Mears, who has a new book, his 14th book, which is published, which is called We Are Nature. And it's being brought to you live tonight by Penguin Live in a joint evening with Telegraph event. So thank you all very much for joining, and thank you too, Ray, for being here as well.
It's nice to be here in this digital reality.
Exactly. I'd lean over the box and shake your hand if I was allowed, but it's a pleasure to have Ray tonight. He's obviously been a presence on our screen for 3 decades now, and has travelled the world, honing his bushcraft skills and coming face to face with some of the most exotic and occasionally dangerous animals on the planet. And I'm told, Ray, that you're not a huge fan of interviews as well. So thank you very much indeed for agreeing to do so today.
My pleasure. It's nice to be here.
Now, the book is all about, in fact, you mention in it that you were asked by your publisher, oh, have we lost Ray?
I'm still here.
You're still there. I can't see your face anymore, Ray. I think the camera might have gone.
No, it must be this connection.
Ah, okay. It says in your book that your publisher asked you to do a book about rewilding the landscape in general. Obviously, rewilding is very in vogue at the moment, but you chose to focus on a different aspect of it, which is the idea of rewilding ourselves and turning the lens inwards. And I wonder if you could tell us a bit more about why that was.
Well, there are 2 ways you can look at it. One is that there are lots of efforts going into restoring natural habitats, which I think is wonderful. And once we've done so, we need to have the tools to appreciate them and understand them. That's one way of looking at it. The other is if we take a historical view of, for example, safari. If we were to go back, 100 years, people going on safari had to adapt themselves to the environment. Today, people go on safari and they expect the environment to be adapted to them, so that at the end of the day, there's a flush toilet and 5-star luxury. And I've always felt that, actually, when you have to adapt yourself to an environment, you gain much more spiritually from the experience. So you mentioned ourselves, it's a combination of these 2 concepts, really.
Now, it's a book that's filled with stories and amazing encounters you've had with wildlife over the years. On that point you just made, there was an interesting bit of the book that caught my eye, where you went to Costa Rica and you'd packed for what you thought would be a jungle expedition. You had your full sort of fatigues and kit and rucksack, and where they checked you in was a sort of luxury hotel by the sounds of it. And I wonder if you could tell us what happened next after that.
Well, I was working with a TV director, who wasn't so keen on living in the jungle, and had neglected to tell me that we would be living in an eco lodge, which was quite luxurious, really. And I went to join the crew, having unpacked for a drink before dinner, to find myself in this cabana with a string of lights and mood music playing and a barman. It was more like a scene from 1960s Bond movie, and I'm standing there looking as though I've just come out of The Deer Hunter. And a couple of tourists from New York came up to me and asked me where I'd parked my M16, and I realized at that point I was very out of place. So I decided I'd head off into the jungle instead, where I was, which is what I was kitted out for. And I prefer to be in the environment anyway. So I went back, got my gear, and hiked up into the rainforest, found a good place to set up my hammock and my tarp, lit a little fire, and had a hot drink, and then turned in. I was quite jet lagged as well, and I got in the hammock and I lay there. And I actually started to go to sleep before I'd even taken my head torch off from around my neck. And then I don't know how long had gone, but it passed. But I heard this sound. I became aware of this noise, and my brain was saying, wake up, you must look. And I think, oh, can I be bothered? And you know how it is. And anyway, I did. So I leant up and looked through the mosquito netting on the edge of my hammock, and I put my head torch on, and I just saw the rear end of this creature go through underneath the end of my hammock, not right underneath the middle, but to the end. And it stepped on one of the logs, the small branches I'd made my fire from, which sent some sparks into the sky. And what it was a jaguarundi, which is one of the most difficult cats to see on the planet. I mean, it's an amazing thing to see. And I saw that as vindication for going up into the jungle. And I had no regrets from that point forwards.
Amazing. And the book itself starts with you in a very different habitat and landscape is it the Sawtooth Mountains of Idaho?
In Idaho, yes, the Sawtooth Mountains.
You were at the time you were tracking wolves, is that right? And I believe you've got a memento of that particular trip.
I do.
Tonight.
Yeah, no. I one day I went out to cast some wolf tracks. I wanted to find some wolf tracks to plaster cast, and actually I had to go miles because the snow was melting. And while I found a lovely trail of tracks in the sand, they were like wet porridge. It held no definition. But eventually I turned a corner, and then the sand dried off a little bit, and I put plaster into the tracks, and that's the track of an alpha male wolf. You can see the size of that. If I put my hand up against it, you can see how big it is. So, a Labrador's track fits within the rear pad there. So it gives you some idea.
And you found yourself at one point face to face with this wolf as well, Ray? Yeah,
there's the same wolf. And, there's this forensic plaster, and it comes in a packet that says it sets in 30 minutes. Well, it doesn't. It takes longer. So I lay down to have a little rest in the sagebrush because we'd been working pretty hard while it set. And I guess 40 minutes had gone past, and I sensed again that something was there. And I just gently sort of half sat up and looked across the sagebrush, and there was this wolf looking at the plaster, thinking, what's gone on here? And I watched it for ages, and eventually I sat up a little bit more comfortably, and I just slowly, and I could do that. And then I smiled at it, I beamed at it, and that little movement was enough to catch its attention. And for an instant, we had that Mexican standoff where we looked each other directly in the eye. It was a fantastic moment. And then it was gone. It was very special.
And I obviously, Ray, you have a huge reputation as a naturalist, and you've dedicated your life to studying animals in the wild and how they behave in their habitats and so on. But I wonder, at moments like that, do you ever feel any sort of fear at all?
No, I didn't feel any fear at all. I mean, wolves aren't a threat to me. I'm big and ugly, and I'd be tough to chew. So no, they're no threat to us. I mean, I don't think there are any truly recorded cases of wolves harming people. It's not impossible, of course, but it's extremely unlikely. We're not on their menu. There are some animals whose menu we might well be on, but the wolf isn't one of them. And I look to the wolf as a brother. We share our lifetime on the planet together, and I felt that was a special moment. It's not every day you get the drop on a wolf. I've had other close encounters with wolves, and on every occasion they've had the drop on me. So that was pretty neat. And of course, the wolf gave not one iota of a sense of it having been surprised, which I rather liked.
Now, Ray, you grew up in Surrey, is that right? And it was kind of adventures as a kid that first sort of sparked your love of the outdoors. I mean, how young were you when you first started sort of setting off?
Well, I didn't think I was young, but I guess by today's standards, I was very young. But I mean, I think growing up in Surrey was a really good place to start, actually. For one, it was chalk downland, and it taught me a love for plants. And that love for plants and their uses and their value and their meaning has helped me win friends in other communities, native communities, indigenous communities around the world. I have a genuine, deep passion for plants. And so I think that was important. And also the woodland, in summer, the steepness of the ground, the humidity sometimes, and the insects. It's quite similar to the rainforest. It's like a smaller, cooler version of rainforest. So I think, the Surrey woodland was really good preparation for bigger places.
And when you say young, I mean, what age were you when you were
I'm
first?
not sure. I mean, I started tracking when I was 8. And I remember going out for the first time with a map and compass when I was 10, going out to get water from a spring. So yeah, it was a long while ago now, Joe.
And was that something you do by yourself, or did you have sort of
Yeah.
like-minded friends?
No, I did these things on my own. Yeah.
I wondered this year, I mean, this is the past year of the pandemic. Lots of us have been forced to come face to face with loneliness and being solitary in the past year. And there's a big difference between the two, isn't there? Being a sort of being solitary and being lonely. And I wonder where you draw the distinction between the two.
That's a very interesting question. And I was an only child, so I'm used to my own company. I think that's very helpful. And I like to make solo trips in wild places. I love to do solo canoe trips, although now I don't get many opportunities. And I feel very comfortable doing it. I never feel lonely because there's always wildlife around that I can connect with. And in fact, when you travel on your own, you have closer encounters with wildlife. If there are 2 of you in a canoe, it's unlikely that a loon will come close. But when you're on your own, particularly if it's foggy, a loon will just pop up beside you. And so I never feel alone at those moments. But it's lovely also to travel in company, because then you can share the experiences that you have. So there are pros and cons to all things. But I think not everybody can cope with being on their own, with their own company. And I do sometimes meet people when I've done canoe trips. I might meet others doing long solo trips who I wonder whether they're really cut out for it. And they turn up and it's like meeting Ben Gunn. They just can't stop talking, and it makes me itch to paddle away. So you have to be there for the right reasons and to know yourself.
It made me laugh reading your book, and you talked about some of the people that have attended your bushcraft courses over the years and the different definitions of silence that people have. Silence to you could be a very different thing to one of your sort of amateur naturalists who was hoping to learn a bit more about the wild, sort of very loudly scratching in their puffer jacket or something.
Exactly. It's a natural thing. It's nothing unusual. But if I ask people to be quiet, they will. They'll sit there and they'll scratch and they'll rustle, and it's too much. But if you ask people to be still, then they're truly quiet. And what you really want is for them to be still internally. Because if you're calm and you're centered internally, then you're calm outside. And it's more than just not sending out a signal. It seems to draw things closer. This inner calm.
Now, television sought you out rather than the other way around. Is that right? Talk to me about how your TV career first started.
I did a screen test for a magazine program called Tracks in, I think, when was that? 93, something like that. I can't remember. And they wanted me to do 5 3-minute items, and I think we ended up doing 10 6-minute items, and things grew from there. I mean, it was interesting. It was an interesting way to learn about television. I think that was a really valuable thing. I think today sometimes people get launched into big series before they're really ready and understand how telly works. But I also got to work with some amazing people. I mean, the cameraman who did that screen test, Barry Foster, I worked with him for 16 years, and it's just one of the most amazing cameramen. There was a whole raft of professionals at that time who were just so skilled and knowledgeable, and many of them have now left the industry, sadly, and with them a huge range of experience.
You said recently, and this will bring us onto your book a bit, of your concern that the sort of boom in nature documentaries that there've been in recent years has in some ways taken people away from the natural world, because we'll happily sort of sit at home on our sofas and watch these incredible scenes, but we don't experience them in the same way. I wondered if you could tell us a bit more about that.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people who are involved in teaching children at nature study centres will really understand that. And if they ask children who come to the centres what they might experience when they're there, some of them will expect to see lions and tigers and elephants and have very little understanding of what part of the world these animals live in, because they've seen everything on television. They're very interested and they're very keen to see things. But they're expecting two things. One is, the full range of exotica, but the other is that everywhere you go, you see wildlife. And of course, really spotting wildlife is much more difficult. When we watch a BBC Blue Chip documentary, which are wonderful, the hard work's been done by the cameramen and the production crews for us. But I actually think part of the magic is in the journey, not the destination. Is getting to those experiences that can be as memorable as the experiences themselves.
And nature, what you sort of begin to learn when you study it in greater detail, it's the fact that so much of it can happen by accident as well. It's the things you can stumble across, right? Even when you're looking for something else completely different.
That's exactly true. And for the last few years, I've been making these wildlife series for ITV, and we have 2 days to make each program. And to do wildlife in 2 days is difficult. It requires us to employ good fieldcraft and to respond swiftly to what's going on. Obviously, we try to put ourselves in the right places at the best times, but you need more than that. So a couple of years ago, we were in Australia and we were filming in the Alice Springs area, and we'd gone to an area where we knew that we would have an above average chance of filming wallabies and kangaroos, grey kangaroos, and we filmed that. In fact, I was getting bored because it was too easy, and I kept feeling that I should go down to the river, this dried riverbed next that was to my left. It was a couple of 100 meters over to my left, and eventually they'd filmed all the bits that involved me, and then we're going to film all the close-ups. So I said, right, I'm going over to the river, and off I went. And what I found was the den of a dingo, and she had cubs, with a litter of cubs. And I found the tracks that led me to the den, and we filmed all of that. So you have to still, we have to use our intuitions, our senses really well, and stay alert to what's going on. And these things make for the best television. It's the things you stumble across. Yeah.
You mentioned a few days ago as well about the sort of modern trends for some of these terms that are applied to experiences in the world, particularly forest bathing and wild swimming as well. And that sort of, even though I was reading these comments rather than seeing you say them, Ray, I could picture the arched eyebrow as you were saying them. You didn't seem to be a huge fan of those
words. I think these are how would you describe them? I don't know. I mean, look, it's a walk in the woods and a swim in a river, and it's as simple as that. And this is not an unusual thing to do. And if your life is such that these aren't common things, or to do, then you need to do something about it. But you don't need to dress it up as more than it is. Well, I mean, you can always, you could encourage people to go and sit in a woodland glade and contemplate the navel. But I'd rather they went and sat there and actually looked around and let the wildlife come to them and learn from that.
So we shouldn't expect a book on wild swimming anytime soon.
I'm very in favour of people going out and doing these things, but I'm not keen on dressing them up as more than they are.
Now, you've obviously travelled the world, been to some fantastic locations, and been privileged to meet the people the indigenous people that can live in these areas, and obviously come encounter the wildlife as well. But you've often said that Britain is not just your home, but your sort of favourite landscape to be in as well. I wonder if you could tell us a bit more about that.
I love Britain. I think we have the most incredible diversity in a small place, and it's all accessible. I mean, there's some parts of Australia where you can drive 8 hours just to cross a property, but here everything's accessible. We can all get to the coast. We've got mountains, moorlands, downlands, woodlands, all sorts of different habitats that we can explore. It's a very diverse place, and wonderful migratory birds that come and go. There are seasonal patterns in the wildlife behavior here that's really interesting. And it's a benign environment. I mean, you don't have to worry about being eaten by anything. There are only a handful of things that might sting or bite. None of them are deadly. So, it's pretty good. It's a pretty good place to be. It's a perfect launching pad for young naturalists who are wanting to cut their teeth and learn the craft before going to bigger places.
Now, I'll in the last 15, 20 minutes or so, I'll ask you some questions. We've had a lot of questions come in already from people watching, Ray, but there's one now that's caught my eye. That someone has asked, where do you think is the wildest area of Britain?
Now that's a really good question. It depends from whose perspective you see it as wild. So the human perspective of wild might be completely different to an animal's perspective. So I would say that from a wildlife perspective, probably the wildest parts of Britain are the verges of our motorways, because we don't go there. And so they're free of human disturbance. But in terms of wild parts of Britain, you have to look, I think, to the islands offshore, some of which are reserves, and for good reason, and they are totally wild. The Highlands of Scotland, fantastic. The west coast of Scotland. But wildness is where you find it. I think it's good to think like the animals that we're interested in, and see things from their perspective. The peregrine falcon makes little differentiation between a cliff to roost on or a tower block. They see things in different terms to us.
It's interesting you mentioned the peregrines. A few weeks ago, I was writing a feature for the Telegraph actually on the peregrines nesting at Wakefield Cathedral, which I don't know if you know the town at all, but it's the church right in the heart of it. And these peregrines are just flying every day along the main shopping parades. And most people have got no idea they're there. And when you
never see them,
stand there and actually look at what is the fastest animal on earth and above West Yorkshire, and the sorts of hunting they're doing, they've counted all these different species of birds. The day we were there, the peregrines brought in a siskin, I think it was, which hadn't been seen before, so they were sort of very excited about that.
Amazing.
And you really see that sort of potential, not just to live sort of side by side with animals, but the potential for real wildness to come into the hearts of our towns and cities as well.
And what's really interesting, obviously, we know that there are still people stealing peregrine eggs from nests for a variety of reasons, largely because they become obsessed with the process. But what's really interesting, in many parts of the country, we are seeing increased successful broods with peregrines, simply because the local population keep their eyes on the birds to protect them. And that's wonderful. I love that concept of naturalists using their skills as observers to protect wildlife. I'm very keen on that.
On that note, do you have a sort of favorite part of the country where you prefer to go and sort of watch wildlife? Or I know you live in Sussex, so sort of surrounded by incredible woodlands, but
I like woodland because in terms of biodiversity, it's incredibly rich. You have a lot of little microhabitats in a woodland. So I'm very keen on that. But no, I'm completely open-minded. The joy is to see what's there, and it's nice to go to new places because that sharpens your senses up to tackle a new habitat and a new environment. You have to start from scratch, and I like that.
Now, on the subject of senses, Ray, I heard a rumor when I was reading around some previous interviews you've done this morning, where when you write, you seal yourself off from the outside world. It described your office as a windowless office, but I wasn't sure if that was right or not. But if you're in that office now, I mean, what is the sort of setup that you have?
It's very sparse. It's very bare. I mean, with the desk covered in papers, but there's no window because if there was, I'd be distracted all the time. So when I'm writing, I want to shut out external stimulus so that I can really concentrate and think deeply. But when I leave here, then it's exactly the opposite process. So then I become, super alert to what's going on around me. So it's
Is
quite
that
nice to flip between the two.
is that because you've obviously spent a career honing those senses? It's what your book is about how to do that. Is
Mm.
that because you are so attuned to the wildlife around you that you need to sort of have that physical barrier, because otherwise you'll just find your mind wandering off or picking up bits of birdsong coming out the window?
I have to, I even when I'm working outdoors, if I have sometimes to switch off so that I can focus on the task in hand. So if I'm making a documentary about something that's not to do with wildlife, then I will have to switch off so that I can focus on what's at hand, because
Mm.
otherwise my curiosity will take over and I'll see something, I want to know what that is, and I'll have to go and explore it. The secret of coming close to nature is to not allow those questions that you sense inside of yourself to slip by. You see
Mm.
something, go and find out what it is. If you're not familiar with it, look it up. Never let that slip. That's
Yeah.
how you learn.
And
And we don't have many years, Joe. So we have to, 80 years if we're lucky. So, that's not many summers to learn just the plants in the country. So you have to make the most of every minute.
yeah, I love, there was a line in your book, and it really resonated with me as someone who watches birds anyway, and is often sort of keen to identify what species it is. But you say that's the beginning as well. Don't just identify it and say that's a sparrowhawk, but ask yourself what's it doing and why is it
Exactly.
doing that. I thought that was
Yeah.
really interesting advice.
That's the key. That's the key thing. And it's, and as a naturalist, we have a tool, our eyes, our ears, our senses are really important to us, and we can enhance them with a hand lens, a microscope, and binoculars. But the spotting scope that birders use is one of the most powerful tools, because
Mm.
not only do we see what a bird is eating, but sometimes we can see what it's eating. And as you said, that peregrine had brought in a siskin that no one had recorded in the area. So the more detail we see, the better the impression we gain of a natural environment.
Mm.
And I think that last year, when people were escaping to rural areas to find freedom from incarceration by COVID, people noticed more. It's almost like there was more nature there, but actually there's probably no more nature there, but people are noticing it.
Mm.
And I'm really keen that people notice more, because the more we see about of the natural world, the more kinship we feel to it. And then the thought of looking after things and taking care of them becomes second nature. It's obvious that we should.
Mm. Here's the book for everyone who hasn't been able to get a copy yet. And I wonder, Ray, you write about this a lot in the book, about sort of practical tips that all of us can take on for improving the way we connect with the wilds and improving our own sort of senses. You sort of break it down in a few chapters between hearing, for example, and make the point that for some, the secret to some happy marriages is selective hearing. And I thought that would be particularly the case over the last year, but how we need to sort of break out of that. And I wonder if you could just talk a bit about it to us now, about what sorts of useful things people might be able to do to sort of engage their different senses with the outside.
Well, I mean, the first thing is to understand that we live in a world where we're bombarded with super stimulus, and in nature everything is cryptic. Sounds are more difficult to detect. The direction can be difficult. Things are difficult to see. But nature has gifted us with the tools to unlock these puzzles. Really, the most important thing we've touched on is stillness. So if you drive out to a nature reserve to observe wildlife, and you get out of your car, you arrive in driving mode, and your psyche is driving, and you need to clear that, allow your spirit to catch up with you. So you sit beside a tree, calmly, quietly, for half an hour, 40 minutes maybe. I have a little stove I like to put on and have a drink. It anchors me to a place for a while. And what happens is you calm down, you become more still within yourself, and then you become more receptive to the sounds, the smells, and the sights that are surrounding you. And in the book, I've explained ways that you can improve your sight, your vision, and your hearing, so that you see and hear more. Is basically, it's just connecting to what we've got. But the real secret is to say to your brain, the control box, please don't turn anything down. I want to hear everything. I want you to flood me with the stimulus that is out there, and then to selectively explore that, because we can do that, and follow some of these threads to where they lead. It's as simple as that. The best way to see wildlife is not to look actively for it, but to passively allow itself to reveal itself to you. So if you walk with a friend and your friend sees a deer, says, look, there's a deer over there. You look, you don't see it. Or if you do, it's just its tail disappearing. And that's because you've looked in an active way with a narrowed field of view. But if instead you turn your senses in that direction and allow the movement of the deer to reveal itself, then you see it.
A few years ago, I went to see some adders in the West Country with a real sort of expert in the snakes. And I sort of arrived at his house in the morning, very excited. You know, we should get out there now, thinking in a kind of birdwatch type way. And he said, no, to see the snakes, you need to think like the snakes. So like you, he put the kettle on and insisted we sat and had a cup of tea first. And he said the best sort of advice for seeing them was to sink into their habitat as well. So run your fingers along the dried bracken where the snakes will come out and lie there and soaking up the heat, and then sort of feel a few inches deep into the soil as well and feel how it sort of cools down in there as well. And he said by doing that, and also identifying the different sounds that they make a sort of long singular note when they're slithering along. Well, the lizards, there are a lot of common lizards on the bit of heathland where we were, and they're a sort of pitter patter. And as soon as you're encouraged to think like that and to sort of open those senses, it really opened my eyes to sort of how you can engage with nature on a different level. You talked about touch a lot in your book as well, Ray, right? Of how you can sort of feel your way through a landscape.
I think it's really important that we use all of our senses. When you stimulate your sense of touch and you explore things around you, you feel temperature, you feel form, you feel softness, flexibility. There's so many things we can detect to a very high degree with our sense of touch. But the moment you start to do that, you also stimulate your other senses. And so the more we use our senses generally, the better. I mean, you talk about adders, and for me as a boy, I studied adders because I wanted to be able to travel in places where there are more dangerous snakes. And there are many snakes that have very similar life histories to the adder. And it was really interesting. It's endless, the things that you learn about nature. I remember looking always for wrinkly bits of tin that you lift up, and underneath you'll very often find snakes and other reptiles, and lifting a wrinkly piece of tin one day, and underneath it was an adder, a grass snake, and a slow worm, all together under the same tin. And the slow worm was a very old one, and it had these sky blue dots on the side of its head, which they only get when they're very old. So it was fantastic.
While we're on cold-blooded creatures, Ray, you mentioned another quality which really people can work on, can improve. It's something that's innate, I suppose, as well, but patience. And particularly when you saw this in the wild in saltwater crocodiles, who seem to you to be sort of masters of patience. I was fascinated to read your descriptions of how they're masters of deception as well. So they will move incredibly slowly to make you think that they're sort of, sluggish and not really interested. And then just at that key moment, they'll just strike at you. What's the patience in crocodiles that you see? And tell us about some of your encounters with those saltwater ones.
Well, they've been practicing it for 250 million years, so they should be good at it by now. Their ability, I mean, obviously they're amazingly camouflaged to start with. I mean, when you actually take a close look at the skin of a crocodile, it's impossible to describe it. It's so complex. But their skill is in stealth, stillness, and an absolute patience, just waiting for the opportunity to come to them, and also reading an environment so that they know the moment to move position, to maybe reposition themselves to greater advantage. And if you're stalked by a polar bear, you know you're being stalked by the polar bear. It's obvious. But if you're stalked by a crocodile, you don't realize it was stalking you. You seem to have these chance encounters with the same animal, getting nearer to where you're hanging out, but you don't realize that's by design. The crocodile has this ability to sit quiet and absolutely still, and to such a degree that even though you know it's there, you cease to have cognizance of its presence. It's almost like a Jedi mind trick. It's telling you it's not there. It's astonishing, but from that stillness, they can also strike with lightning speed. And it's the one creature on the planet for which I have the most respect. It is an incredibly dangerous animal, and it's not one that you should ever play with.
You write in the book about the moment where you were camping by the side of a lake where the crocodiles were, and you had a very close encounter.
Yeah, I did. We were camped on the coast of northern Australia, and it was a very high tide, so the beach was only a few meters wide. And I'd speared a stingray with some Aboriginal people that day, and I'd wanted to cook it inland, which is what you would normally do. But the director had asked me to film it on. He wanted to film the cooking sequence, so we cooked it on the beach where we could get the sun setting behind it. And of course, the beach was only 4 or 5 meters wide, and I'm camped on it, and typically away from everybody else. And all I had for camping was a mosquito net dome. And there was this noise after I'd gone to sleep, and this enormous crocodile crept past within arm's reach. What I didn't know is that they have they like shark meat and they like ray meat. Not me, fortunately, but it had come to clean up on the scraps. But that crocodile had been stalking us for days.
Wow.
And I think even at the time that we filmed there and we'd left, none of us realized. It's years later that I realized actually the encounters we'd had with that crocodile, it had been specifically stalking us. And that was a huge crocodile. That was easily 5 meters in size. And I'm not exaggerating. It really was a big crocodile. And I've been told that no one has survived being bitten by a 4 meter or larger. So yeah, I reasoned at the time I could bash it on the nose with a machete and get away. I wouldn't have stood a chance, in truth. And years later, I made a documentary with professional rangers who harvest the crocodiles. They collect them from Darwin Harbour and they relocate them. Then I came to really understand both the power and the danger of these animals. It was astonishing.
There was another bit of the book, Ray, where you talk about something we can all do, and it's actually something we all have done by necessity in the past year, of really sort of sharpening our instincts and the way we can respond to what's around us. And that is very simply by taking a walk as well. You write about how that is something that's how humans developed. And really that's something that certainly prior to the pandemic, we'd really lost that sort of that need, that drive to just simply go for a walk and see what's around. And I wonder, that seemed to me to be something that everybody could do. I wonder if you could just give a few more tips on that.
I think it's a matter of picking a place that you can go to on a regular basis, and seeing it through a year, seeing it all the way through a year, going out on a regular basis, a daily basis, and noticing the changes, noticing the different animals that are there, whether they're having young. And as I said, as we discussed earlier, it's like, why are they doing what you see them doing? But the key thing is taking time on a daily basis to go to the same place, and if not daily, weekly, but to see the year through, season by season. I think that's really important.
I mean, that's been for me a real sort of privilege of the past year. We've got a very small but very old stretch of woodland near our house, and just being able to see the seasons unfold through that over the course of a year by going out for that daily walk has been a remarkable experience, actually. And the sort of the extent of the nature you discover really on your doorstep as well.
Well, while I was writing the book, near to me, near to where I live, there was a roe deer who gave birth, and I describe that in the book a little bit. And she gave birth to a young roe buck, and they were both in the same area again a few nights ago. And it's nice to see them, see that young roe buck has got some antlers for the first time in velvet. And, you know, it's nice to say hello and talk to them and say hi, you know, and they get to know you. And you are not a threat. And I had a friend who used to feed birds in her garden, like many people do, but she'd always whistle to let them know that she was putting the food out. And, you know, it's amazing how you can develop a rapport with wildlife by such simple things.
Mm. Your book finishes, Ray, on a very sort of passionate note, really, of arguing, firstly, the scale of the challenges ahead of us, but also there's an element of hope in there that we do have it within our own ability to solve the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis that we've found ourselves in the midst of. The pandemic has obviously highlighted a lot of that, and it's what makes your book so timely now. Coronavirus was almost all the evidence shows now a disease that was emerged from nature and came into humans, and in the same way it's kind of sharpened our connections with nature by being forced to be locked down and sort of cutting off all the sort of normal ties to our lives that we had. So has the past year given you more sort of hope for the way that we might respond to the crises we find ourselves in?
I think very much so. I mean, I think in several ways. I think firstly, it's been really interesting to see how people have taken to nature, how important, how they now value wild and green spaces. That's encouraging. We need to hang on to that.
Mm.
But also just simply looking into the sky and seeing it clear. While there were fewer cars on the road, fewer planes in the air, I think that's encouraging, and it's a reminder of how well nature is able to restore ecosystems and the environment given the chance. I like to think that we might get to the point. It's a little way away at the moment, but we might get to the point that we actually choose to restore ecosystems, not simply for our own selfish reasons of survival, but because we might actually improve things and create a more utopian existence for ourselves and our children to grow up in.
Thank you, Ray. That's some fascinating answers there. And as I say, I've got a very long list of questions that have been sent through by some readers. So I'll just ask you them as they come to me, if that's okay. The first one is and you might already have answered this in the terms of the ancient crocodile with a taste for ray meat, but what is the biggest, scariest animal you've ever encountered?
Yeah, it's a saltwater crocodile, without a doubt. And I've had it. There's one crocodile I filmed. It was a huge saltwater crocodile at a billabong that was drying out. And what happens? The crocodiles become concentrated, and there were some really big crocodiles in this. This saltwater crocodiles in this billabong, and one of them got hold of a dead pig, which was about 350 kilos. Now it's a huge animal. And it had it in its mouth like a pheasant in a Labrador's mouth. And it was swimming off into a dark recess where it could guard its prize. And I put my little tin boat in front of it. And it tried to submerge with that pig, which is astonishing to see it actually try to go underwater with it, but it was too much. And then it hissed at me. And the hiss was so malevolent. I have to say it was terrifying.
So you moved the boat out the way?
I moved the boat out the way. Discretion is the better part of valor.
This one is, what's the most exciting animal encounter you've ever had in Britain? In Britain?
Oh, gosh. The most exciting encounter I've had in Britain was actually with a sparrowhawk. And I'd finished a walk and I changed my shoes back into normal shoes and I was tying them up. And I was about, gosh, 10 meters from a big lime hedge. And as I stood up, a sparrowhawk had come through this hedge at full tilt. And it didn't see me and I hadn't seen it. And as I stood up, we saw each other. And in the last meter between my face, it did a 90-degree turn, and you could see surprise in its eyes. And I actually felt the draft from its wings as it went past my nose. That was amazing. That was exciting, I can tell you, because if it had hit me, I probably wouldn't be talking to you now.
Now, this is a question from Faith, and she asked, do you have any pets?
Do I have any pets? I have a Labrador. He's my one, Jag. He's a wonderful companion. Yeah.
And I guess this will answer this question, but this is from someone who says, have you enjoyed spending more time locally in the past year?
Oh, definitely. I've always loved spending time locally, and one of the sadnesses for me is that very often seasonally I have to go away and make programs on various reasons in different places. So I miss some of the key components of the seasonal change. And this year I've had the opportunity to see that through, which has been amazing, just great. You know, to see that roe deer give birth and then later on to see her mating. You know, that's wonderful to see that whole cycle through.
And do you have a favorite animal as well, Ray?
I've got a few. My favorite bird is the spotted flycatcher, which I absolutely love. In terms of animals, I'm very fond of leopards. I've spent a lot of time tracking leopards and wolves, of course, as well, because the wolves are very clever animals, as are bears, actually, come to think of it. But I like leopards. I like leopards for their courage, and they don't let anything mess around with them. You know, they're amazing, and their ability to move invisibly and silently is just astonishing. When you track an animal over a period of weeks, you get to really know it. You get to see how it lives, how it thinks. You get to read the landscape as it reads the landscape. You get inside the mind of the animal, and that's a very special thing. And leopards I find fascinating. They're just astonishing.
Why the spotted flycat? All the rest of your favorite animals are sort of apex predators with very big teeth, but the spotted flycatcher, why that?
I like the spotted flycatcher because I've never seen one squabble with any other birds. They just seem to get on with their life. And I think they set a good example to the world.
This is from Martin, who says, in the past, we've had a chat about the reintroduction of lynx into the UK. Now we may be reintroducing Scottish and Eurasian wildcats. He asks if we have sufficient prey, do you think, for them to keep away from feral and domestic cats? And beyond that, a question for myself, how far do you think we should go with the rewilding of Britain as well? Okay.
I don't know enough to specifically answer the specifics of that question on the wildcats. In terms of reintroducing apex predators, there's a part of me that says this is something I'd really like to see, because I think it would be a wonderful restoration of the habitat and the ecosystem as a whole. It's a concept of rewilding, which I very much believe in. Whether we're ready to, though, is another matter. And if I think back to that, this wolf had been part of a successful release of animals in the 1990s. And a year after this, 4 days after I cast this animal lost protection under law, and a year later it was shot. Now, I've no problem with people controlling the numbers of animals if you need to maintain an ecosystem. But what I was saddened by, what I saw in Idaho, was the way that local people hated the wolf. There was a medieval hatred of an animal that they should love. And partly the reason for that is that there wasn't proper and full consultation with the whole community before releasing the animals into the wild. So I noticed that there've been some acts of direct action where people have released animals into environments just to get the ball rolling. And I think that's unwise. We run the risk of demonizing creatures that we want everybody to love. Apex predators live according to their nature. They don't commit crimes. They just do what nature intended them to do. But we may not understand that or be ready to accept those consequences. And a few years ago in Sweden, a lot of wolves were released. And once they started to kill the occasional dog, this became a very big political issue within the country. I think what I always, my feeling on the release of apex predators in the country is this, that we currently don't successfully coexist with hen harriers and golden eagles. Both of those animals are being persecuted still, as are buzzards and red kites, actually. But certainly until we can live, coexist harmoniously with hen harriers and golden eagles, I don't think we have the right to consider releasing another apex predator, not because of our wishes, but we have to think of the animal. But I do hope that one day we might get to the point where we find a way to live alongside the animals that should be in the environment around us. And that, to me, is a definition of civilization. To me, civilization is not about art galleries. It's about whether humans can live alongside the other species that we are supposed to coexist with.
That's a lovely definition of civilization, Ray. I've never heard that before. But you make the point in the book as well, the importance when it comes to rewilding of involving different stakeholders as well. By their nature, many of these animals will attack livestock. If you take wolves as the example, which you did in your book, and you can't do anything without different stakeholders on side as well. So what we seem to have at the moment in some instances is a kind of a rewilding lobby that is telling farmers this is what we want to happen. It has to bring, like every good successful conservation project, you have to bring everybody with you, don't you?
Correct. That's exactly right. And we tend to have in Britain polarized views. So we have people who are completely anti-hunting, you've got the pro-hunting lobby, and they can't find common ground. And hen harriers, for example, hen harriers do well on grouse moors because people managing the grouse moors provide the right habitat and a food supply. But obviously there's a financial cost to them if you have hen harriers and taking grouse. We could solve this issue overnight if there was a financial incentive for grouse moors to encourage breeding pairs of grouse, of hen harriers, sorry. But unfortunately, if you suggest that, there's a whole political thing that comes in and say, well, but I'm anti-hunting, I can't agree with that. It's like, well, look, let's get the wildlife first. Let's restore the wildlife, and we can sort the ethics out afterwards. And I think you see this all the time with the megafauna issues of poaching with megafauna. What we must do first of all is be pragmatic. Let's save the animals first. We can solve the ethics later.
Now, this is another question that's come in. What do you prefer, the heat of the jungle and desert or the cold and wilderness of the Arctic?
Oh, I like them both. I like them all, to be honest with you. I get on with them all. If you were to ask me which are the most comfortable, I'd say it's always the dry environments, dry cold and dry heat. But I love them both. And although obviously travel is an issue ecologically, I do think there's great value in people traveling and seeing more of the world to understand our place within it. And if you have the opportunity to see the boreal forest and the rainforest, you see the yin and yang of forest environments. That's really interesting. You can contrast them and the differences between them, but also you can see similarities between them as well. And I think that it has a humbling effect for a human being. And also it's very revealing about how ecosystems
That's
work.
an interesting point you make about travel, because certainly at the moment, when you look at the new climate ambitions that the government announced last week, reducing sort of travel emissions or aircraft emissions, shipping as well is a big part of that. But as you say, if people can't see these things that we're meant to be conserving as well, then, and also crucially, if those areas, there's nothing to monetize it as well, to protect those landscapes and habitats, then you have a bit of an issue there, don't you? I mean, how do you think,
it's exactly
what do you think
right.
should happen with the sort of future of travel in the current sort of climate crisis that we find ourselves in?
I think we need to look to science to find cleaner ways to travel, cleaner fuels, but I think travel is really important. Travel has taught me to respect other cultures and to be tolerant of other cultures and other ideas. And, you know, whatever we want to do in terms of ecological issues, we first of all have to get on with each other. And as a species, we are not good at that. And we desperately need to solve that issue. If we can all sit down around a table without arguing over political differences, we could achieve anything. That is actually the biggest problem we face as a species. It isn't global warming, it isn't pollution, it is the fact that we can't work together and agree on. If we can solve that one thing, then we can put anything on the table for discussion and find a solution.
This is another question, Ray, which is someone asking if you were in the Scouts as a boy. And I wondered, with the recent passing of the Duke of Edinburgh, whether you'd done much with the Duke of Edinburgh award scheme as well over the years.
So yes, I was in the Scouts. I think Scouting was brilliant. It's a great movement. I've had a lot to do with Scouts over the years. And the Duke of Edinburgh's award, I have participated as a celebrity handing out awards, and I had the opportunity to meet the Duke of Edinburgh 2 or 3 times. I think he was an amazing man. His enthusiasm for the project and his commitment to it was quite remarkable. And it's the most difficult thing. I think he had the most difficult job in the world to shake hands with thousands of people on a daily basis and be interested, but he genuinely was interested. And the sharpness, how much he knew about things that the people he was about to meet. This wasn't a party trick. This was genuine interest. They always said of Nelson that Nelson could recognize ordinary ratings he'd served with 10 years later if they were standing within view in a crowd, and pick them out. And the Duke of Edinburgh had that quality too. He was a remarkable.
And his passion for conservation was utterly genuine as well, wasn't it? There was a quote after he died I loved, where someone said he was a conservationist before it was trendy.
He was in the vanguard of conservation. And I think one of the things, I went to China last year filming, and one of the things I saw there that was very important was that they are creating their very first national park. And it made me reflect that national parks are a new concept. They haven't been around very long. Young people may have been born into a world where national parks are well established, but they are a recent phenomenon. And it was useful to see that and to remind me there's still a lot of work to be done to create new reserves. And I think that's something that he really understood. And his commitment, it was just astonishing and completely genuine. I have huge respect for him.
2 more very quick questions, Ray, if that's okay. Firstly, mainly because I want to hear the answers to them. Number 1 is, what is the biggest animal you've ever encountered?
Biggest animal I've ever encountered? It'll be whales. So I haven't encountered a blue whale, which is a great shame. We missed that one. It's one animal we've missed on our trips trying to film. I've swum with whale sharks and with basking sharks and really large manta rays, which is that's an amazing experience. So yeah, I guess those are the largest things I've been really close to, and very close. Yeah, I mean, it's wonderful to be so close to something alive and sentient and to look it in the eye. It makes you want to reach out and communicate, and you can do so with these animals without any harm. I've been very close to a large grizzly bear, but you can't stare that in the eye, because to do so would elicit an attack, because that would be a threat posture. And but I have a very fond memory of being very close to a grizzly bear, and think that was one of the most amazing experiences in my life.
Not many people on this planet would have fond memories of being very close to grizzly bears, Ray.
I interviewed a woman a few years later who had had a similar encounter with a grizzly bear, and she said to me, I looked it in the eye, and the eyes were just so beautiful. I just wanted to communicate with it. And I really understood that, because when you look into a grizzly bear's eyes close to, they are beautiful, but you must avert your gaze. And she didn't. And the net result was she got bitten in the face and then in other parts of her body, and was quite badly injured. And the bear was just defending itself. It didn't want to harm her.
Just very finally, Ray, because I know it's a question on all of our minds at the moment, is can the world's wild places survive in the future, do you think?
Yes, but it's up to us. We have to protect them. We have to take good care of them. We need to increase some of them. Conservation is a task which is never completed. And it's something we need to work at continuously forever. And I think today, better than ever, we understand that in doing so, we conserve our own future. So yes, I do think that we can succeed as long as we're not apathetic. The most important thing is to act, to do something. Each of us can do something in our lifetime to improve things. It might be as simple as planting an acorn, but we can all make a difference. The choice is up to us. But if we sit in our chairs and do nothing, then we don't deserve a future.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Ray Mears. What a privilege it's been to spend an hour in your company. And thank you for those amazing answers. I feel, despite not being able to travel anywhere for the past year, that we've been on a bit of an adventure tonight. So I'm very grateful for some of those stories.